Over the last 5 or 6 years, I really feel like the purchasing of old digicams and older, like 2010-ish, 2012 digital cameras has become super duper hip and something that a lot of people have been jumping into. But whenever it comes to purchasing older cameras, I think a lot of times we overlook, or more importantly, mistake these older-ish cameras that have some professional type settings as being completely outdated and definitely not being usable. It's like there's no in between. Either it's cute and it is crunchy and it's supposed to look like shit, or it has to look, like supreme 8K for $1,000. But if you're a little bit patient and more importantly know what you're doing, you can make any of the budget older used cameras into something that is honestly going to knock your socks off, or more importantly knock the socks off of a potential client you're looking to see. This is 5 reasons why buying old cameras is absolutely better. Reason number 1 is that limitations do grow your ability. A lot of people are going to read this, hear this, and think, okay, this is super cliche as hell, but it's absolutely not. If you're someone looking to get into the cinematography field of work, an older digital camera is honestly probably going to do you very, very good. A lack of reliable autofocus and the fact that the colors may not be that great in 8-bit for some of you who complain about that may be something that absolutely turns you off, but it's going to be something that is a blessing in return.
Whenever it comes to the blessing in return cameras, getting these older DSLRs and SLRs, mirrorless cameras, and everything in between, one thing that we have to take a look at as well is what price point we're buying these older cameras at. A lot of times, even whenever it comes to buying used gear, we want top of the line used gear. And if this isn't your main cam, your everyday cam, a lot of times that doesn't even make sense. Instead of going for an A7 III, I know the autofocus is fantastic and you've heard all these amazing things about it. Look at a Panasonic S5. The autofocus may be a little bit slower whenever it comes to stills, and in video it may be non-existent, but whenever using manual glass and the fact you're getting 10-bit 422 as well as being able to export out RAW, you get all the extra bells and whistles for about the same price as a used A7 III. You get this newer camera, and if you are fine with the 8-bit, get something with better colors that looks cooler and the whole lens system is cheaper by going with like a Fuji X-T3 or a Fujifilm X-T2. You can get both of those still underneath the price point of the A7 III, and in the X-T3 you're going to get yourself 10-bit 420 internal recording as well as a fantastic 24 megapixel sensor and amazing colors all throughout, even with the X-T2.
There wasn't a lot of reliability and focus tracking around 2017 whenever it came to these digital hybrid cameras, and so honestly you're kind of just setting yourself up to learn how to use cine lenses. These manual focus lenses are going to be cheaper, they're easy for you to get into, you can adapt vintage glass, you can start working on funky quirky things, whether it's using something like Contax is nice, CY, they're very clinical lenses, or going something with like a Helios or a Petzval, however you pronounce it, lens. You have a lot more at your fingertips being able to adapt glass and not really having to worry about how the focus motors are working. Are they quiet? Are they blah blah blah? Whenever you have 8-bit footage, it may not have as much range whenever it comes to colors, especially in shadows, as 10-bit footage, but this is just a great way for you to learn how to actually light the space and not the face to be able to give you more depth in your shadows. It's one of the reasons why films and shows like House or Iron Man 1 could be shot using not only just cinema cameras like the Canon C300, which didn't have huge bit rates, but also something like a Canon 5D Mark II, which is the reason why Canon bricks all of their DSLRs now for video purposes, is because the 5D Mark II was too damn good. And if people could use that, even though it's not 10-bit out the box and has 422 and all these different color ranges and can export ProRes RAW, I'm pretty sure you're going to be just fine if they could use that in top-of-the-line TV productions and cinema productions. But yeah, learning how to operate cameras like this that don't have reliable autofocus and AI that does everything for you is nothing but a huge, huge benefit to you in the long run. Reason number 2 is the fact that a lot of these older cameras, they were still meant to be small whenever it came to the mirrorless system. Compact camera system, CCS, mirrorless systems, they were meant to be little guys. And honestly, until about maybe 2021, they were just going to be little guys. Sony, everything was smaller. The idea was a small package, small footprint that was still able to pack a fantastic punch. Once we started getting Canon and Nikon in the game, that's whenever things became a little bit bigger. They started worrying about the grip, was more professional. Sony started hearing the noise and tried to combat that as well. There's nothing bad with a larger grip, but the great thing about a lot of these earlier, I guess, mirrorless cameras is the fact that the priority wasn't on how big the glass could be. The priority wasn't on how big the grip could be. The priority was on performance to size because they were meant to go with you everywhere. This may just be me, but I absolutely love the idea of small, carryable, little tiny cameras, especially something like this. This little camera right here can take fantastic photos, but also record cinema DNG 12-bit RAW for me. And it's in this tiny little form factor that's able to fit into the palm of my hand, even with a giant ass cage on it. Smaller cameras, that's still a big deal to me. Fujifilm has been trying to make that work. This right here is a full frame small camera. I wish we could go back to small cameras. It would mean a lot to me. The next point is about colors. And this isn't about more of these CMOS sensors and about video specs and stuff like that. This is actually more to do with some of the actual older cameras, something with either a smaller sensor or, more importantly, a CCD sensor. If you go back to around 2008 and before, CCD sensors were a lot more prevalent, more than just in the Leica family with the M9 and the M8, but also in a lot of Kodak branded cameras, Fujifilm FinePix cameras. There were tons out there, and the CCD sensors actually gave fantastic images, not only just straight out of camera, but the editing was also fantastic. It was like having an unlimited literal roll of Kodachrome in your camera. The reds were punchy, the saturation was great, skin tones looked amazing, and the grain pattern was organic and beautiful. A trade-off was the fact that high ISOs really weren't that usable, but when you think about it, the fact that when you're shooting film, a lot of the film you're shooting is balanced for daylight, and you're probably shooting in daylight. It's the same thing with these cameras. If you want an image in low light, you could just do what you would do with film and shoot a long exposure. And if you want a nice image in daylight, just make sure you're not overexposing it and make sure that you have it in focus and you're good to go. CCD sensors are absolutely fantastic. So are the Foveon sensors from Sigma's cameras. Those are some of the best images you'll ever get. If you have a chance to get it, I think a DP2 has a Foveon, and a few of those, the Quattro. They're amazing cameras, and right now, bang for the buck, they're doing pretty good as far as price-wise. And again, if you want something that looks different and you want something that actually is different, not just CMOS sensor after CMOS sensor after CMOS sensor, CCD sensors are really where it's at. The fourth reason is somewhat subjective, but I truly do believe that older cameras and older camera manufacturing, whenever it came to sensors, the priority wasn't really on so much sharpness of everything. It wasn't really on speed of readout. It was truly on dynamic range, texture, and of course color. I think that some of the best sensors are the older sensors, and there is a distinct look to these sensors just because the technology wasn't there, but also what the priority was. Everyone was leaving these CCD sensors and after leaving film, and so these CMOS, people developing CMOS sensors wanted to still tune it to something to where people would feel like they're getting a similar look and view, and so they prioritized a lot of things, and sharpness wasn't really one of them. It's one of the reasons why the Canon 5D Classic and the Canon 5D Mark II, why the original Nikon full frame D series cameras that were DSLRs, why Fujifilm's X-T2, the X Pro 2, the X70, why they have such an amazing look. The way lights, highlights hit, the way shadows roll off, the way textures happen on the camera. It's not meant to be overly sharp. It's not meant to be perfect for if you're cropping into 500%. What it's meant to be is just a beautiful image that has everything integrate really well. Shadows, highlights, noise pattern, and of course colors were things that were put in priority over the sharpness of an image and over, of course, worrying about anything like moire, any kind of banding and things like that. It created some other issues on its own, but damn, a lot of people love going back to these cameras because there is an actual distinct look that doesn't look similar to everything we have today. The final point is price to performance ratio. That 5D Mark I and 5D Mark II, they're 12 and 16 megapixel cameras respectively, and they still do fantastic for portrait work, and you can get those for about $200 to $300, probably with a nifty 50 lens. Cameras like the XH1, which honestly have just as good as IBIS as the A7 line, like the A7 III and whatnot from Sony, that has a pleasing sensor but is also very cheap. You can have for $500 or $600. I constantly see Nikon Z6s are going for about $600, $650. Nothing wrong with it. Full frame camera, does all the fun stuff you want it to do, just doesn't meet the spec head specs. $600 is a great price for that. The price performance ratio blows it out of the water, especially considering you can get Inlog exported out of that with a small little upgrade, and if you already have an Atomos Ninja V. Panasonic cameras, the S5 is the best little cinema camera that you can have around for hybrid shooting, and honestly, it's kind of sad that you can get it for about $800, $900, just the camera body and one battery only. It's great for us. It's sad that it's gone that way. There are a whole bunch of other cameras that fall into this too. I mentioned Sigma cameras earlier. The A7S II is a camera that you can get for about $500 now. And no, it doesn't have 10-bit, but the 8-bit 1080p isn't bad at all. Nothing to shake a finger at. And of course, the cult classic Panasonic GH5S, the Panasonic GH5S, that cult classic, a camera that honestly still outperforms a lot of full frame cameras to this day in the hybrid market. That camera can be had around $500-600. Get yourself a lens and it's micro four thirds. You're in shop to start creating some really great images for commercial client work for about $700-800. But the price to performance ratio is one of the biggest things that I think everyone should pay attention to whenever it comes to purchasing a new camera. Yeah, there are other things to look at that are very important. You know, bit depth, I know it means a lot to people. Sharpness means a lot to people. IO means a lot to people. But more than anything, I think keeping that money in your pocket so that you can actually buy a really nice lens that is going to make a difference for your photos and videos is probably the most important part. Way more important than any kind of spec that anyone in a marketing team or anyone that's doing a paid review can tell you. That's absolutely damn sure. Again, take it light, but take it, and have a good one.